Jeffrey Charles Hardy is a seasoned healthcare consultant and president of Care for Peace, dedicated to global healthcare initiatives. With over 30 years of experience, Jeff is a respected industry leader, writer, and speaker. His latest book, To Care for Peace, is igniting conversations worldwide, driving positive change. Welcome to the show. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Brad. I'm glad to be in North New Zealand right now. I've never been there.
You are here in virtual form, and very, very happy to have you here. So for those who haven't encountered your work yet, perhaps you could just share a little bit about your journey and where you are, who you are.
Well, the journey began when I was very young, but marketably when I was in the United States Coast Guard as a hospital corpsman trainee during the Vietnam War. And so I was stationed on Government Island Infirmary in the San Francisco Bay. And we were receiving military soldiers, seamen from the Mekong Delta, from the coast, who had weird diseases, snake bites and some of the diseases, and of course wounded. And I ended up getting to know these guys really well. But what happened to me was that I realized that the process of caring really let my guard down. It was like all of a sudden caring was who I was, and they liked my caring and they gave me care back. And I got this feeling that I called peace, because I knew it wasn't happiness. I'd been seeking happiness, pursuing happiness for a long time, and I didn't have it. Even happiness, having a new car, or a new girlfriend, was not something that this sudden new feeling was. It was just a feeling that I'm calling peace, and it's definitely not the time between two wars. Peace is not the time after a war. Peace is not sitting on top of the mountain with your legs crossed and your arms crossed, your eyes closed, while the people down in the valley are suffering. That's not peace either. I just realized that this feeling I had through care, you can attain peace. And that just completely resonated. I was 19 years old, and from that point on, I worked in hospitals all over the United States. I ended up becoming a hospital planner. So I worked with architects, engineers, people who own the hospitals, to plan and design hospitals. And then I worked outside the country doing the same thing. And just little by little, I honed my planning skills until it became something that I could share with more countries than I ever imagined. And the thing that resonated was this care for peace idea that became something more than just my care for my peace, but my care for your peace. But when we went to Myanmar and helped them build a community development and health center, we said that if you and we can provide care in the form of education, health, and business development, community development, then the government and the people will have peace. What a big surprise. So this is all really based on care for peace.
This episode is brought to you by Start With Values. If you'd like to reduce stress and increase fulfillment in your work and life, then check out startwithvalues.com. There, you'll be able to download the Values app, which helps you to discover your core values and bring them to life through micro habits. There is a values course so that you can learn about the science and practice of core values, and you'll be able to pre-register for my forthcoming book called Start With Values. I hope that these tools will enable you to achieve more fulfillment and make more meaningful decisions on your journey of life. Now back to the episode.
So care for peace is the primary feeling, the subject of which I bring to this conversation and all conversations, and especially the book that I wrote after I got back from Myanmar, which is right here somewhere. The book, is to care for peace, a global mandate to secure the human evolution, the second human evolution in perpetuity. Now, all of a sudden, I had this idea, and it wasn't all of a sudden idea. It just came to me. I was driving in a taxi from New Delhi to Agra, and I was in traffic after traffic jam. It was just packed, and the feeling I got was like, this is humanity now, and I realized something has got to give because all of the things that were happening in the world at the time and even now, the end of the first human evolution occurred at some point. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was sometime in the mid 60s when we had the mutually assured destruction. But it's also the time that women's liberation and the liberation movements all over the world occurred, where we started looking at the Jewish community and what was happening for them, and the black community and Asians. I mean, it was like all of a sudden the world kind of got it, and the peace movement began. And I realized that we're no longer in that first human evolution. We're struggling in what I'm calling the suspended human evolution. We're like fish flopping on the deck. Look what's going on in Ukraine. Look what's going on with this Gaza and Israel thing. I mean, what a mess. It's like that's not the suspended human evolution time. That's still in the first human evolution. And so this is the period where we've got to call the shots the way it is. So the key for the people I talk with, like you and your listeners, is how do you use care for peace, and how do you use the first, the suspended, and the second human evolution that hasn't even begun yet. You use it by allowing it to help you assess where we are now, where the world is right now. Where are our leaders? Do our leaders care for your peace? Do they care for our peace? Do they care for the peace of the earth? I mean, are they destroying the planet? Are they destroying relationships? I look at Trump and Netanyahu and a lot of these people in the world. These people have not even come into the suspended human evolution yet. They're still in the first human evolution. Hey guys, first human evolution is over. Please join us in the suspended human evolution and start designing the second human evolution, because we have to take charge. God is not doing it for us, and we can do the planning, because I'm a planner, of the second human evolution with our gods and with all the knowledge that we have at our disposal right now.
Absolutely. What a fascinating perspective. And I really, the book is highly recommended. There's a link in the show notes for anyone who would like to click through and find it on Amazon. I love the cover, by the way. I think it's a great cover. And perhaps we could step back and define, dig a little deeper. So what do you mean by the first human evolution? You said it ended somewhere around the 50s with mutually assured destruction. But what are some of the characteristics of humans in that first human evolution?
Good question, because when did it begin? It began 2.5 million years ago when we were pounding things on rocks and we were sticking sticks down holes and getting worms or ants or something. And the trajectory of humanity was survive. It was just, what can I do to survive today? And it was, we can follow the Darwinian stuff that, came at us of the survival of the fittest, and his partners in that. He wasn't the one who actually coined that expression. So it's all the psychological things that happen, Carl Jung, Freud, you name it, and all the philosophers that occurred. But more recently than anything else, really before all those philosophers, even before Seneca and some of the Grecian folks, we were just trying to survive. And our definition of history is the history of wars, history of people killing other people, uh, raping the environment, raping the women, just uh, no different than what's going on in Ukraine right now. And so all that happened during the first human evolution, the survival of the fittest stuff, the wars that we call history, when my idea of history is the progression of the human into his civilized nature. So we're really looking at how human nature evolved. So when I say the end of the first human evolution, I'm really looking at the point where humanity had evolved in our thinking, in our laws, our civil obedience to laws and to each other and to helping each other. And so the problem occurred that, okay, we developed that, we got there for that far, but what do we do with it? And that's where right now you're hearing a lot on the news, on NPR and on a lot of CNN, where you're getting inundated by some concepts that are like, why are our leaders so bad? And why don't we have leaders like what we used to? Well, I don't think used to even comes into this. We've got to find our leaders now who know that the first human evolution is over, who know that we are in this this weird, almost flotation spot between the old and what has not been designed yet. Nobody knows what the second human evolution is because we haven't designed it yet. Yes, I'm a planner and I'm speaking planning language. For instance, example, architects always say form follows function. Well, what I say is no, you have to have a process. And even before a process, you have to have an approach to a process. That precedes function because you have to know how to talk about function. You have to talk about how you're going to move ahead. And I call that whole period before planning pre-planning. It's a period that you and I are on right now. Now, I'm going to share something that I feel is probably the most valuable thing I can share. And that is, it's people like you who are now taking this important ball to the rest of the world. Podcasts are all over there. Podcasters are all over. Now, one of the things that has happened with me is all of a sudden I'm being invited to what I'm now calling global podcasters. And these are people who are realizing their place in this process. Because remember, the process precedes the function, precedes the form. You guys are now in charge of this pre-planning process, and not me. I'm bringing the tools. I'm a planner. I design to build hospitals and clinics all over the world. I've been in Nigeria and Vietnam and Myanmar and Curacao, Netherlands Antilles, Bahrain. Yes, Bahamas, Bahrain. I've been all over the world, and it is just wonderful working with people who all get it. I'm so used to people who get it. People, look at nurses. I come up with this idea of care for peace. Well, guess what? I started meeting nurses. Nurses automatically care for peace. Mothers care for peace. Teachers care for peace. Plumbers care for peace. I mean, I suddenly realized, wait a minute. Human nature already has care for peace in it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. But what we do have to reinvent is the language that we use to discuss the second human evolution. And to do that, we have to look at where we've been, the first human evolution, where we are now, this suspended human evolution where we're grappling around. I always think about that scene in the first Indiana Jones movie where there's a cliff on this side and a cliff on this side, and then there's this rickety wooden maybe bridge with ropes, and there's the bad guys on this side and the bad guys on this side, and Indiana and that wonderful little boy, they're hanging on this bridge. That's the suspended human evolution, barely able to go either direction. And we've got to use this time productively, and that's where you come in. And you thought this was your podcast where you're interviewing me, but really, this is my podcast, and I'm interviewing you. I'm fascinated by what you're doing. And that's the reason why I was asking, who's your audience? I'm curious to know, who are the people that you can reach out and touch and bring into this pre-planning process?
Well, thank you, Jeff. I love the perspective, and I never thought of it from that angle. But absolutely, and when you ask the question, who's the audience? It is people who want to improve themselves and to improve the world in some way, in small steps, whatever they're capable of. So understanding and having some language to describe where we've been and where potentially we could go and what we could co-create, it's inspiring, and I'm sure people will be fascinated to find out more. So we're in this transition phase, and it is a bit weird. So we've gone from survival, fight, flight, freeze responses, basic human impulses, and where we want to go, and we're seeing glimpses of it, right? So it's kind of like we're taking 2 steps forward and a step back and a couple of steps forward, and I guess that's what you mean by the suspended human evolution. What do you think some of the characteristics, even though we don't have it yet, but what might be some of the characteristics of the second human evolution? Obviously, peace and collaboration is part of that.
Well, one of the things that I've done in my book is I've written, there's 4 templates. And the 4 templates are the personal template, the relational template, the cultural template, and the organizational template. And these are guides, because on each one of the templates is a guide on how we can perceive the next step, so that we are able to discuss the questions that you're asking. I see the second human evolution a place where it's going to be peaceful, and we are going to do a lot of preventive medicine, preventive communication, preventive everything. Now, when you say we're already moving in that direction, here, I started a non-government organization called Care for Peace. Guess what? So, but when we went to Myanmar, I saw so many non-government organizations like Bill and Melinda Gates, Save the Children, Doctors Without Borders. I mean, that it's all over. The World Health Organization, the United Nations. It is definitely moving in a multifaceted direction right now. And I think the one thing we need to do in the suspended human evolution is really recognize what it is that people are actually already doing, and
Yes.
and bring them into the discussion. I really, really would like to invite Harvard and MIT and Stanford. I better say Stanford because they're in my backyard, and UC Berkeley, because, hey, UC Berkeley and UC Davis both helped my foundation a lot. I mean, their internal organization, the legal organization at UC Berkeley, helped us get our international IRS stamp, so that we could actually go out and work in Myanmar, which was at the time, big bamboo curtain. So what you said about the fact that we're already doing, I've been working side by side with those people, but I'm also working side by side with you, and I'm working side by side. The totally weird thing is to look at Donald Trump and Netanyahu and Bolsonaro. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them out there. Where have they been? Did they go to the same educational system? Did they learn anything? I mean, I'm sorry. I'm talking about all these guys. I'm not saying I'm against Republicans or I'm against, because I've seen some real stupidity out there. Now, allow me to quote William Gaddis. William Gaddis said in his book, The Recognitions, stupidity is the deliberate cultivation of ignorance. Let me say it again. Stupidity is the deliberate cultivation of ignorance. Now, when he said it, he was talking about, leaders who cultivated the people. They didn't let them be educated, like the black people in America, the African Americans who came over and were held down. And I realized that, wait a minute, I have been stupid in my life by not looking around and trying to help the people around me, help them learn. And so it's all a very important process of being a leader. You have to know what your job is. And I look at the leaders we have in the world today, and they don't know what their job is. Their job is not like our Congress, where these guys are pointing fingers and, oh, we're not going to vote for that because that would help the other guy. No, 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 no.
Yeah.
That's so wrong, and it's cultivating their own ignorance. How devastating is that? It just blows me out. I don't understand it.
Yeah,
What do
I'm
you
with
think?
you. I totally agree. And I think when our leaders are basically engaged in a popularity contest rather than working towards positive outcomes for us. So, I mean, how much money is and time is wasted in just trying to be the most popular choice. I would love to see leaders
Uh,
really focusing on impact and how we can secure a better planet for the next 7 generations and beyond.
yeah.
Long-term thinking rather than just what's going to happen in the next 6 months, 12 months. A lot of people seem quite resigned to the fact that we're in the Kali Yuga, as the Hindu scripture would say. This is the end of times. Is the suspended evolution a doomsday scenario, or is it something that we can, how do we shine a light to say, hey, this is just a transition phase? Because a lot of people seem resigned to, there's just going to be a catastrophic war and everything's going to fall to pieces, when it shouldn't.
Well, you've really thrown a load of ideas at me, and I think the first thing I want to do is back up to the last statement that you were making, um, which is we might be getting off track, but the fact is, no, our leaders are trying to figure out what to do next to save their jobs and everything, but we have to design a job description. That's part of
Yes.
our job during the suspended human evolution. We have to design a job description that says, look, guys, it's not national anymore. It's got to be a global nation. We have to have a global nation. Now let's talk about what that global nation needs. So, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you're not going to include your own nation, but that's part of the first human evolution. It's like, my tribe's going to survive and yours is not. I'm going to survive and you are not. No, that has to be thrown out. Global nation is what we need to focus on. And then our process of backing up is to say, okay, that's what we have defined our global nation to be. Now, the part of the process in my job description is to make sure that my country is leading that charge. What an idea. I mean, I I'm just amazed at how easy this will be once we get started. but we haven't gotten started. Our language is not yet there yet. We don't have the first human evolution because I want everybody on the street, all the kids in the school, to talk about the first human evolution and what is that second human evolution. What is a global nation? What is the global nation? Is there something? By the way, I don't know. Somebody might already have that domain name. I don't know. I don't care. You know, I'm here to throw out the tools, and I'm glad if
Yes.
somebody wants to take that, make any money they want, because we have to have the tools. We have to have the leadership to be able to use the tools, and most of them, frankly, are common sense. Hey, care for peace. That took me a while to figure out how much it was a part of human nature, but killing for peace is definitely part of human nature too. Look at the whole first human evolution. I mean, we killed for peace. Hey, to the victors, go the spoils. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
who are the victors? Are the dead ones? Are they the ones lying on the battlefield with their heads cut off? What's the deal? So no, we've got some work to do, but you're doing the work, and it's the language that needs to be in your words, Brad. This needs to be something that you develop. I'm coming up with these ideas, but it's common sense. Let's have a conversation. Ideas. I've got one idea, for instance, called "from to." What's "from to"? Well, when you're talking about something like, well, in the first human evolution, we we were executing people because capital punishment was something happened. Now, where are we now? Well, some countries still execute and some don't. Now, where are we going? What would the global nation be? Would it, if we've come all from that execution thing that we did, and now we're talking about lethal injection because that's the most humane way to kill a person. Hey guys, do you realize what's happening? Well, you know, we aren't putting people on crosses anymore. No, we're putting them on crosses and sticking a needle in them instead of a nail. I mean, come on.
Mm.
We are moving slowly, very slowly in the right direction, but we've got to look at where we are going to. So, in the conversations of from to, you can talk about abortion. You can talk about population control. That was one we were talking about in Myanmar, about population control. They say, we don't like that idea. We don't like people controlling. We had the military controlling us for many years. They they allowed us to kill our babies, and that's a fact. I learned that from some of the midwives, and it's like what is it? And that's when I came up with, no, it's not population control. We've got to start talking about population continuity. Oh, yeah. We want humanity to endure. We want our neighbors, our friends, our communities to endure. Well, what's my job? Well, my job is to replicate myself, not have 15 children. Yes, I understand the people in Mali have 15 children because it's their social security. We are not going to throw stones during the suspended human evolution. We are going to respect where we have gone, where we've been, and where we've come today in the suspended human evolution, because I think one of the questions that you were asking was, are we in doomsday? You know, uh, is the next, is this it? And I think part of the discussion is this it? Yes, where we were in somewhere where we thought America could be great again, and we're going to doomsday. Whatever you want that from to be, bring from to into your discussion.
Without judgment. It sounds, I like what you said about acknowledging the struggles that people have had and integrating that rather than rejecting. It sounds like acceptance is a big part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And remember, Kubler-Ross has 5 stages of grief, and acceptance is the last one. Why? So why don't we start with that?
Yes, yes. Yeah, there's a lovely therapy called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is just all about accepting
Huh.
what's happened and committing to move forward. And it sounds like that's what
I
we need at a collective level.
I like that. I like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah,
ACT, acceptance,
and
commitment,
commitment therapy.
therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. How do your ideas about human evolution fit within the context of what's called the Holocene era?
Well, the Holocene era is a geo. It's a geographic. It's not about humanity. It's really a time period that has been established to be what within the last 3,000 years, I think, and it fits on the Pleistocene and the Jurassic and all those other ones. No, uh, it's there. I'm not. I have I respect it as an era,
Yes.
but when I talk about the human evolution, I'm thinking mostly about some of the books that I've been reading, like what was it, *Sapiens*. Um, my favorite book today, this year, last decade, is Isabella Wilkerson's Caste, 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 a book that I believe deserves the Nobel Prize because this woman has put her finger on America's treatment of the blacks, of India's treatment of the untouchables, and of course of the Nazi treatment of the Jews, who actually learned from the American treatment of blacks. I, the book blew me out.
Mm.
So I just think that the process is the solution. That's right on the front cover of my book. I have that quote on the bottom of the book. It's not the system is the solution. No, the system is a far off result of a solution, of a process. And an example of that is everything I've done in my life in building hospitals. I've built more than what, $6 billion. That's probably an understatement of hospitals because I have no idea what they cost because I was in charge of looking at floor plans and I was looking at how they would operate after they were open. That was really my major job. But this whole process was what got us the hospital that worked or the hospitals that didn't work because I showed up and they already had the blueprints, but nobody had decided how these darn places would operate. And so all of a sudden, the doors open and they lose money. They may as well be throwing it in the wind. And the process is the solution. We've got to start talking about the process. We've got to start using the process that comes with the pre-planning stage. And we have to look at the approach to the pre-planning stage. How do we approach it? Who do we invite to discuss the pre-planning stage? What are some of the ground rules? The ground rules, like, for instance, leave your opinion at the door. We are going to talk issues, and issues are going to be in the center of the discussion. And the last person who we know what their bias is the winner. Because I don't want biases. I don't want opinions. I want to discuss issues. And when you do that, you're going to throw a wrench into every discussion about abortion. It doesn't matter what side you're on, because that's two sides against each other. No winners. You got to bring an issue
Mm.
to the fore, you know, and start looking at the process because the process is the solution to the problem, which is right now multifaceted, but primarily we aren't using a language. We aren't using the planning tools that need to be used for this discussion. We're just flopping around like a fish on a deck. Yeah, but what is the water that those fish need? They need the water of life. They need the inspiration that comes from knowing what it is you're doing, knowing where you're going, knowing where you've been. And that's what we have to do right now. We have to get into the process and start swimming, or we'll sink
Mm.
like a stone.
Exactly. And so many people are looking for systemic change, but you make it much more practical and achievable. Instead of trying to change the entire system, which is, I mean, it's overwhelming for most people. You can't even comprehend because, as you said, it's so multifaceted. Start with simple things, changing
Yes,
processes. What
yes.
might be an example from my own experience? Many organizations are shifting towards becoming what is called B Corps. So they honor all stakeholders rather than just financial profit. They're looking at impact on community, they're looking at impact on planet, impact on the team, and impact on customers. Like that's a good start in terms of shifting process, right?
It's excellent. It's excellent. Yes, and I know that process well. I've actually been involved in it, in my
Okay.
latter days. And corporate social responsibility goes along with that. I mean, it's like, okay, you bring that issue into the B Corp conversations that you're having, and you realize that, okay, we aren't going to be looking at monopoly. We're going to look at diversity, and that's one of the ones that is on my card, by the way. The minute you get to the templates in my book, you're going to realize that I've laid out. It took me 50 years to write these templates, okay? Because I started them literally 50 years ago, and little by little I changed them as I went, and people looked at them and said, Hardy, you're off. And boy, were they right. So I changed it. So it's you got to look at where you're from, and we were from monopolies. Okay, now where are we going? We're going towards diversity. What about corporate social responsibility? Well, we were going, we make the paint, and we better be in charge of the paint for forever for the world, and all the other paint companies can go to hell, but where are we going to? Well, two is, well, wait a minute. Why don't you be in charge of the white paint? We'll be in charge of the black paint. Let's talk about the other. So you got to bring, and then the discussion has to be, well, what are we making the paint of? Well, no, we're not going to use lead-based paint. Hey, that's good. See, this is another example of how far we've come. And it's an example of why aren't our leaders involved in how far we've come and come and recognizing where we need to go. That's their job. Their job is not doing what Trump's doing, sitting there eating his Kentucky Fried Chicken, and saying, "Oh, I believe, yeah, all the states should be in charge of abortion." No, what you got to do is you got to take that discussion of abortion to town hall, and you got to look at that issue from every point of view you possibly can. Look at the countries that don't even understand what you're talking about. Myanmar, Burma, as in, they didn't. What are you talking about? Abortion? We don't have abortion. We have midwives. Oh, and so you can look at every
Mm.
single country and look what France is doing. Look at, you know, different countries are doing different things. So we need to back up, and look how we got here, and why is it even an issue? Great, great discussion topic. Why is abortion an issue? Well, I put it in the same issue category as castrating women. Now, I know they call it something else, genital mutilation, but what a horrible thing. And oh, you mean you're against abortion? I'm just putting it in a category that if you're going to bring the issues together, you better put them all together and discuss them individually, but also together. Do we believe in the euthanasia? Oh, where does the euthanasia issue go? Doesn't that go in this? Are we killing babies, or are we going to call a sperm a baby? I mean, how far back are we going to go in this discussion about when the child is born? When do we call it a child? These are important issues. I'm not throwing my ideas in the ring right now. I'm saying bring them all together. Those are the things we're talking about. But we're at a point now where we need to talk about them. We've got to talk about them. We've got to pull them all together. Every country needs to pull them together, and then we need to get together in countries. We need to have the Davoses of morality, the Davoses of population management, population continuity. I mean, how about food insecurity? Oh, yeah, we do. I spent some time with what was a wonderful man in Myanmar who was in charge of the World Food Program, spelled with two M's, PROGRAMME, the World Food Program. And at the time, he was doing a phenomenal job helping the Rohingya, the Muslims who had been put in concentration camps in Myanmar. They were feeding them. Thank you. Now, how do we take that silo effort, beautiful effort, and think about it? Just think about it. I didn't say combine. I said think about it in relation to population continuity. Because what the people were doing in the concentration camps is they were not having a whole heck of a lot to do with their time. And you know what teenagers do when they don't have enough time on their hands to learn instead of do that thing that they do. So, we've got a lot of discussions ahead of us, and I've had so many of these discussions with so many different people. I was in Bahrain. I had 14 people, doctors and nurses and owners and architects, all sitting around the same room on pillows, by the way, not around the table. They were sitting in pillows. And this is in an Arab country. It was Bahrain. It was a beautiful country, beautiful people. There wasn't one person from the same country as another person. And I realized afterwards that there were at least 4 different religions represented in that room. But we were talking about how are we going to admit patients? And it was a central discussion. I've had so many central discussions with people, and that's what we need to do with these difficult these issues. But we do have to think about the global nation and what it's going to look like when we are done.
And it's important to remember countries are a very recent invention. For most of history, people were there and there was lands and we moved around and traveled and shared ideas. But now we've become more sophisticated. I hear a lot of people worry about a one world government that dominates the population with control, but it doesn't. That's a scenario that some people have dreamt up, and it certainly could happen. But there are other alternatives where we work together to preserve our planet and resources for future generations. It's those that are interesting.
Amen. And I think that the best way to do that is to have a working democracy, because you have to take all the ideas and make sure that they're all addressed. And when I look at Congress right now, that is not a working democracy. That is a autocracy. They are an autocracy. And I think that it is the saddest thing in the world to see people who should be providing ideas, and they're helping each other by throwing out ideas, and they're getting together and they're together agreeing with things, not just listening to one guy, who's telling them what to do. It's a disaster that has already happened. Now, what are we going to do? Because the naysayers and the people you're talking about who are really afraid that what's happening now is going to keep going and get worse. They're right. It's getting worse. So that's something that we got to bring to the table, and we've got to bring that to the center and start working on that and looking at it. And I'm looking for a really good leader out there. Haven't seen one. I've seen several very eloquent people. I don't know who is going to rise to be a leader of the movement towards the global nation, because the global nation, boy, it better be democratic. Just, you know, it,
Yeah.
it just, it's the only way. We've learned that it's the only way. The autocracies become dictatorships, and then we get Hitlers. We get really bad guys. It's Golem finding the ring. I mean, it's just so pathetic to me. Okay, so that's where we are now. We can look at where we're at now in the suspended human evolution, and we better stop flopping on the deck like the proverbial fish. Better get back in the water.
A lot to think about there, but you're also suggesting that we have control to design this future rather than just resign ourselves to where we are now, suspended evolution,
Yes,
or,
yes.
regressing. And I've always thought if we were to just dissolve these fictitious boundaries that define countries and try and dissolve some of the polarities and engage as humans, because in my experience traveling, most people are kind, most people are curious,
Amen.
most people
Yeah.
are caring. They would love nothing more than to invite you over for dinner and to get to spend some time together. Doesn't matter about their religion, and having a future where we paint a picture where that's possible, where learn about people's cultures, preserve all of these cultures, preserve religions, preserve all of these traditions. It's
Absolutely.
wonderful. But maybe there's a council of elders. They don't have to be elders as such, but who based on wisdom and based on experience and expertise, they make the important decisions to keep us on the right path, rather than one person wielding all the control here,
Right.
influenced by financial interests and so forth. So I really like that you're painting a picture of hope.
Well, and I like how you're grabbing what I'm saying and putting it into your own words, which is basically, yes, we are in charge. Yes, we've got to start using the right tools, and then we have to get the interpreters to make sure that those tools are translated to every language in the book, in the world. And that's our job right now. And Brad, that's your job. That's your job.
I really appreciate it. Any highlights or milestones from your trips and travels around the world? What have you learned about people?
Oh my gosh, just what you said. Ditto. People are so wonderful. That's just, even the leaders that I've worked with are wonderful, because most of the leaders I've worked with are just trying to be a leader of a village or a community. And some of them are chief ministers of entire states in another country. I met with the governor of River State, had wonderful conversations with him. And in fact, he's the guy who I was talking with when I came up with the idea of a health clinic that was operated by Muslims and Christians and tribal people, because we could show the rest of Nigeria that there's a place where they're all getting together. Care for peace. And that was with the governor of River State, His Excellency Rotimi Amici. A wonderful, wonderful man. I have met so many wonderful people, and thank you. I can just tell stories based on your statement that you made. Just great people all over.
Absolutely. I'm sure there are many people feeling quite inspired right now. What would you like them to do?
Oh, take these words, make them your own, and in every conversation, hey, you want to look at someone and say, what do you think of the fact that first human evolution is over? And they'll say, well, that's a fact. What do you mean it's a fact? I never even heard of that before. And then you started the conversation. It doesn't really matter what questions you ask. What do you think about the second human evolution that we haven't even designed yet? Oh, there's an idea. But I think that the one thing that I want to share in closing is the first sentence in my book. And it's just what I think is a fact. To care for peace may not be the secret of life, but it is as close to the secret of living there is. To care for peace may not be the secret of life, but it's as close to the secret of living there is. And that's what we need to do. We need to get close to the secret of living, which is to care for peace.
Jeffrey Charles Hardy, thank you so much for an inspiring conversation, for empowering us to take action rather than just wait for life to happen. I really appreciate it. For all of you who've stayed with us this whole conversation, please do check the links in the show notes. There's a link to Jeffrey's work, Care for Peace, and to the book. And yeah, thank you so much. I've really appreciated your time today, Jeff.
Brad, thank you for your leadership.
My pleasure. We'll see you all in the next episode.